wedding between James IV and his 12-year-old bride, Margaret Tudor. And this would have been such a marvelous place to have a party. The musicians would be up in the balcony. The minstrel gallery, that's where they would be entertaining from. Down here, if you don't see any tables, well, if you'd come back here, if you'd come in the early 1500s, you would have seen long trestle tables running the length of the room. The floor, you wouldn't have seen the stone. It would have been strewn with bracken, with ferns, with straw, with fresh herbs to make it smell nice. And that's what you would be walking on. The tables would have benches running along either side of them. And that's where you and I would be sitting, invited to this banquet, unless we were invited to join the top table. The top table up on the dais. The dais was where the king and his wife would sit. And if you walk towards, or look towards the top table, you'll see that once again we have the cloth of state. This time it is the king's cloth of state. It doesn't sport Mary de Guise's or Margaret Tudor's coat of arms on it. This is the coat of arms of the king in Scotland. Once again, a lion rampant and a shield supported on either side by a unicorn. And that particular coat of arms changes with James VI when he becomes king of Great Britain. Now, some things you might like to know about a banquet here. Banquets here would stretch over hours. And when you go down and look at the kitchen, you'll be surprised because they were producing huge amounts of food in the kitchen, plus in the kitchen immediately beneath us as well. You might think that in 1503 there wasn't much in the way of groceries, but there was trade, a lot of trade, and ships were able to navigate right up to Stirling Castle. The Firth of Forth was navigable up to Stirling. And it's only that windy meandering, I mean, it's a very slow river now because it's been much infilled as the fields round about were cleared of their peat. And all of that has sort of congested the river. But you would have everything. You would have fantastic meats, fantastic spices, fruits. Vegetables would be grown locally. Onions, leeks, carrots, fabulous things that would be grown and stored in the autumn and used for banquets throughout. There was an ale house on the castle that provided all the ale for everyone. And of course the king wouldn't have drunk ale. He would have drunk fine wine. There were breads that were baked here. The ordinary people ate the lovely, dark, wholemeal kinds of bread. The king and the court would eat fine milled flour bread. Which is quite funny because now we know that white bread is not so good for you. But of course, in those days, it was a sign of your status. People who were at the long tables, you and I, we wouldn't have plates. Plates really weren't invented yet. The king would eat off pewter and the queen, or they might have silver. But we would have what's known as a trencher. We would have a thick slice of very stale bread. That would be placed in front of us, and we would take our meats. Forks weren't invented yet either. So when you tell your family members not to eat with their knives, well, that just was the only way you could do it back in the Middle Ages, because forks hadn't been invented. So you would, a whole roast peacock would come past you, and you would take your knife. And ladies had lovely, delicate knives that they too carried on strings around their waists. But you would cut off the meat that you wanted, put it on your trencher, and then proceed to pick it up with fingers. You would have a spoon at each place, because a horn spoon or a wooden spoon, and you would use that to eat your soup or your gravy. When you were done with the meal and everything that had been served on your trencher was gone, your trencher would be given to either the servants or the dogs. And the long tables, they would be used for people to sleep on, people who didn't have a bed somewhere else. Bed and board. So if you come up here, you can, if you want to go up there, you can take a look. The Queen's chair is the one on the left. There's a couple of wee kids sitting in those. The King's the one on the left. The Queen Margaret Tudor, her chair is on the right. And they do hold medieval banquets in this room. I don't know what the smell is, but it could be. The only fireplace in this room that works is the one behind the king. behind the king's chair, and I think it must make it very hot.
What was for dessert?
What was for dessert? Good question. Are you hungry? Wonderful things for dessert. Of course, a lot of things were baked in crusts. You would have apple pies as well as meat pies. You didn't have jellies and things like that. Those hadn't been invented yet. But you would have fruits of all kinds, and you would have sugared fruits, fruits that had been glacéed. There would be sweetmeats. Desserts would be things that you could pick up with your fingers. In fact, the whole of a medieval feast was eaten with your fingers, except for when you went to cut off the bits of meat you wanted. Now, I want to take you down to the kitchens, and I especially want to take the men down to the kitchens because the women were not allowed anywhere near this tripod, with the exception of pulling the feathers out of the chicken meat. And they, of course, were the dairy meat as well. But it was the men who did all the cooking. And in the kitchen, there are some interesting recipe books for men, so you can have a look at those and see what you're going to fix for dessert. Custards did exist, by the way, so you could have a custard, a sweet custard, and there were plenty of pastries, things with sweetened raisins that would be used in a pie, in a shallow pie or a tart. What would you like for dessert?
No chocolate?
No, I don't believe there was any chocolate. Chocolate was introduced into Scotland in 1745. I'll tell you exactly when it was introduced, because it came in a funny thing. It came with the English soldiers who came to fight Bonnie Stirling, and they brought it in long waxed tubes, sort of rolled up. It was like this chocolate pasty goo. And after the Battle of Press and Pans,